I can't even explain how nervous I am to be recording again. I'm very excited. I'm excited that the podcast is back. I feel like my heart is going to beat out of my chest. But anyways, hey guys, this is the Master of Nothing podcast. I'm your host, Emily, and I strongly recommend that you find things that you're bad at. Just shy of 2 months since I've uploaded a podcast. And let me tell you, it has been a rough 2 months, to say the least. So, shocker, Emily rebranded again. Nobody's surprised, everybody expected it, and everybody's annoyed, myself included. But I figured since for some people this might be the first episode you're listening to, especially with the new name, I figured we'd do a little bit of like an intro episode. I have some things that I want to talk about later, but I figured we can just talk about me. So if you don't want to hear about me, sorry, sucks to suck, I'm great. You're losing out. So my name's Emily. Hi. My nickname my whole life has been Em, mainly because growing up there was always more than one Emily, and I defaulted to being the one who wasn't called by their actual name. We're not going to psychoanalyze that, but in my sports, my school, my class, my inner circle, my everything, there was always more than one Emily. Everybody called me Em, mainly because most people couldn't pronounce my last name, so Em is what stuck. So I'm now 22, and I still go by a 2-letter nickname, which for some reason just feels weird. So my name on Instagram right now is Miles, which I love. I think it's very cute, and I would love if that's what people referred to me as. I haven't had the balls to introduce myself as that, and I also haven't asked anybody to call me that because it feels weird to go up to somebody that you're friends with and be like, hey, can you start calling me by this name? And I don't mean in a sense of if you're actually changing your name or if you're exploring with your self-expression. I mean as a nickname. I don't know. I feel weird going up to people and doing that. So we're working on it. If you meet me in person or if you see me, don't call me Em. I'm 22 and I currently live in a city that I don't really enjoy, but I found my people here. In about the last year, I've really, found my group of people, and now I'm terrified to leave. I've lived here for about 5 years, and, 4 years. In August, it'll be 4 years. And the first basically 2.5 years of me living here, I was so excited to leave, and I was so excited to get away from here and never come back. And unfortunately, it's not unfortunate, but it just threw a wrench in my life plans. I now have people here that I love and that are critical parts of my life, and I don't know how I'm ever going to move away. I am going to move away eventually because I cannot live here for another, I don't know, hopefully after the 2-year mark. That's all I got. I don't know where, and I don't know how that's going to work, but I grew up playing a couple sports, and then I quickly took to working out when COVID shut down my grade 12 year. I've gone to university a couple times. I've dropped out a couple times. I've continued playing rec sports as I've been a grown-up and also working out, but honestly, the biggest thing that I've been doing in the last 5 years is developing a crushing desire to move to the mountains or move into a forest and hide from all people and never speak to anybody ever again. My dream job at this current point in my life is to make podcasts in random niche places in the world and to not have to have a formal desk job ever again because I hate it. I don't like celebrating my birthday. I am a crippling perfectionist who also currently has no desire to do anything. I've spent my whole life trying to fit into whatever new niche I've adopted into my life, and people see that, or people take that as me having an entirely new personality every 6 months. And I've recently started to realize that my innate need to fit solely into one niche is causing me to burn out and resent every single niche I've ever loved. And now we're here, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about later, is how I've over-niched myself. When I first started the podcast, which was almost 2 years ago, in August, a year and a half ago, which that was so many names ago. I don't even remember what the original name was. I want to say it was Explore the Known was the first name, maybe? I don't remember. But anyways, when I first started the podcast, I was knee deep in my gym girl personality, which hasn't dissolved, but I thought that I had to record episodes solely about health, fitness, and wellness. And while I absolutely love that, and it's still such a huge part of my life, it became really, really difficult for me to think of topics that excited me every single week while I was actively learning new hobbies and trying to embrace, just creating different areas of my life that I also love, so that my only personality trait wasn't that I work out. If you've been here for a while, that I've changed the name of the podcast about 16,327 times. I kind of convinced myself for a really long time that in order to embrace more topics of conversation on the podcast, I had to change the name, I had to change the branding, while still fitting into that like health and wellness niche that I created when I first started the podcast. But I recently started realizing like the only reason that I felt like I could only talk about those things was because that's what I isolated myself to. Nobody else told me like, oh, if you start the podcast talking about XYZ, that's all you can talk about for the entirety of the... Nobody fucking said that. I'm just psycho. So while we're talking about it, I've changed the name again. We're getting new pictures done in the summer, and we're gonna have like a new setup, new little... I want to say it's a studio. It's not going to be a studio. It's literally going to be a corner in my bedroom, but we'll have a more like formal podcast spot, which will be really fun. But yeah, I changed the name, and now to something that I feel fits me more as a person, like in my entirety, instead of the weird version of myself that I was trying to become but only hyper focused on for 6 months. My mom often jokes that I'm kind of like a jack of all trades. Well, no, I wouldn't even say that she jokes about it. I would say that my parents both use that as a defense for me when other people in my life are like, oh, Emily has a new personality every 2 months, and Emily changes her hobbies all the time, and Emily, you know, has worked a million different jobs. And my parents have always used that as a defense, that it's not a bad thing. Just a jack of all trades. I've worked a million different jobs in a million different industries. I try every sport that I can. I've tried every craft that I can. I try everything for the most part. And I used to really feel like that was a negative trait. Like, oh, look, there's Emily. She can't pick one thing to do, and she can't pick one sport to play, and she can't pick one degree, and she can't pick whatever. But I am very slowly learning that trying new things, accepting that I'm really bad at some of them, and continuing to grow is a good thing, and it's proof that I'm trying to expand myself as a person and not icing myself into a tiny little box. So when I was a kid, and I mean like little, like I think the first time that I knew that I wanted to be a doctor was probably when I was like 8 or 9. But yeah, when I was a kid, I wanted to go to med school. I wanted a big fancy house, and I wanted all the bougie cars and the vacations and just all of the expensive luxuries that life could afford me. And then when I was a teenager, I still wanted to be a doctor. I still wanted to go to med school. I still wanted the house and the cars. But I also started realizing how lonely I felt in life, and I really started craving people being around me. And that led to some not great relationships and not great like friendships and interpersonal skills. When I went to university for the first time during a global pandemic, I learned that I had ADHD pretty quick, and then I got a diagnosis very shortly after, which still learning to cope with, still unmedicated, still working through that. And I also learned that I didn't want to spend the next 10 years of my life studying to be something that I was no longer sure was what I wanted or what I was meant to do. I also learned that my painful desire to have people in my circle and to cling on to all of these friendships and relationships, that resulted in me being friends with some pretty terrible people who subsequently ruined my life for the next 3 years of university. When I dropped out of school the most recent time, so in like 2023, I had just learned that I was being offered my dream research project and dream research position, but I realized that I didn't want anything anymore. Not in a depressed, like, oh, I had no motivation to be alive or exist, much less work type of way, but in a way that I had realized I had dedicated so much of my life and who I was becoming to who other people wanted and assumed I was going to be. I wanted to be a doctor, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that that was like not accurate for 10 years of my life. I did really want to be a doctor, but once people found out I wanted to be a doctor, then it became this thing of like, oh boy, remove any other possible outcome of my life, because if I was to become anything shy of that, I would have failed. Not because their expectations were that high, but because I had set that as their standard and anything else was just not acceptable. And I think that kind of fucked up my ability to self-regulate what I wanted and figure out who I was, because 14-year-old me realized like I'm going to disappoint all of these adults in my life who were prideful of their impact on my life to becoming a doctor, if that makes sense. I was going to disappoint all these teachers who put extra work in with me and who, you know, took pride in the fact that I was a good student because it meant that I was going to go to med school and I was going to be a doctor, and they were going to have some small part in that. My entire focus in middle school and high school was making sure that I did well in school and making sure that I did extra curves when possible so that I would get into a good university, so that I could get into a good med school, so that whatever. And hey, guess what? I'm still smart. I'm still furthering my education. I'm still working on myself, even though I'm not in an institutionalized education setting. Like, even though I'm not in university and I'm not taking formal classes, I'm still smart as fuck. And that's just the reality of that. You know, I get really defensive over the version of myself that existed when I was dropping out of school, because people were so mean to me. People were mean to me always, because people hate when you're smart, people hate when you're stupid. There's no good in between. But I remember so many people who I thought were my friends, or I thought were people who cared about me in any aspect. And just the comments and stuff that were made when I dropped out was like, people are mean, and it makes me laugh. And there were so many people that pulled the whole like, oh, I knew she was stupid. I knew she was never going to make it because she was dumb. And I'm like, I would love to show you my grades. Fuck you if you said that. Because first of all, why are you talking shit about anybody else? It literally doesn't affect you. Shut up, you're a bad person. But also, like, I dropped out with like a 94 average. I don't know what that translates to GPA because we didn't do GPAs. My percentage average was like a 94 when I dropped out. So fuck you. But anyways, I'm still smart and I'm still doing good in life and I'm still furthering my education. I'm not going to be a doctor anytime soon. I don't want to be a doctor anymore, but that doesn't take away from the years of work that I put in to get to that point. So after I dropped out in 2023, I spent the next like basically 1.5 to 2 years bouncing back and forth from job to job and to thing and whatever, never really feeling content or passionate about where I was or what I was doing. And that brings us to right about here, where, well, it's currently the 5th of April in 2025. This is going to come out like, I don't know, the 12th or something. I don't know my days, but we're here. And guess what? I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing with my life. I hate my job. I shouldn't say I hate my job. I switched jobs in like February from a job that I loved, but I was just bored and there was some stuff going on anyways. So I switched jobs, and the first like month that I was there, it was like, wow, I feel so great. This was such a good switch. I'm feeling so much more fulfilled, and like every day feels so busy, and I constantly feel like there's new stuff that I need to do and learn and whatever. Guess what? We're 2 months in, and I realized that I didn't actually enjoy the job more than my old job. I just had to go through training, so everything was new. So of course I felt like I was actually using my brain because I didn't know how to do anything. And now I know how to do most stuff, and I'm like, well, this is another shitty office job that I'm going to do for like a year and be miserable, but I shouldn't complain. Okay, so back to not over niching yourself, or kind of how I fucked myself over by picking one specific niche. When I started the podcast, I was so convinced that I needed to find one specific like genre or niche. How many times am I going to say that word this episode? Sorry in advance. But I was so convinced that I needed to find one thing, that was what I talked about. That's what I identified with. That's what the podcast was about. And I think people are doing that in every aspect of their life, myself included. Whereas, okay, if you went like 50 years ago, for example, you were not encouraged to find a niche in life. Nobody wanted that. Nobody encouraged that. Nobody like publicized the fact that they were finding one specific thing that was their thing. You just didn't do that, because then it made you stick out, and it gave people like an identifying factor about you of like, oh, this is Susie, she does blank, or she is blank, she's whatever. And now we're the opposite. Now everybody and their mother has a niche, which is not a bad thing. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It is a good thing. However, if you isolate yourself so much to one niche that you do not allow yourself to expand and grow as a person, you're fucking yourself over. And then it reverts back into this thing of, this is no longer me encouraging myself to explore one hobby or one trait. This is me discouraging myself from trying anything else, if that makes sense. So when the podcast started and it was all gym and fitness stuff, which I still love, I'm not saying that that's going away. We're still going to talk about that. Just sprinkled in with other things. But when I started the podcast, I was like deep into my gym bitch era. And that was great. And I love her and I love that version of myself. But then it became this weird shift when I started adopting other hobbies because I was no longer in this weird fight or flight from the end of my university time where I was like, I wasn't even functional as a person, let alone like, yeah, it was terrible. So when I got out of that and I realized that I had mental space and mental time to do other things, I felt like I was weirdly losing the self-identifying factor that I had given to myself by being the girl who works out. And guess what? You can be the girl who works out and also the girl who, I don't know, paints or whatever your other hobby, like whatever other things that you want to do in life. I can't remember her name for the life of me. I'll find it and I'll link her TikTok or her Instagram, whichever I find, in the show notes. But she is, your typical like granola girl adventure bitch. And then she also works out and like heavy works out. Like she trains fucking hard. And I remember the first time that I saw her TikTok, and it was a TikTok about her talking about how that's a duality in her life. She can be like a granola girl and she can also be like a gym rat. And I don't know why I had never thought about the fact that those felt like such conflicting personalities in my own personal life. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm your granola-iest bitch, but like, that is that vibe and personality and like hiking and being outside and doing all that stuff is such a core part of who I am, and it's something that makes me so eternally happy. And so is working out. But for so long I didn't have any representation of my life of people who did both, and for whatever reason it felt like those two things could not be meshed into one lifestyle. It's like I did not feel like I could go work out in the morning and then go hike at night. Not that I couldn't, and I was doing that, like I'd go train in the morning and then after work I'd go paddleboarding and I'd go sit at the lake or the river and whatever. I was doing that, but I felt like I couldn't advertise that. Not advertise that. I don't know how to explain it. And I think I always felt like if I wanted to post gym content, like on Instagram, for example, I felt like if I wanted to post gym content, I had to make a separate Instagram for it, because the duality of me posting like hiking pictures or me doing whatever, and then also posting gym content on the same day, it just felt like it wasn't like correct. I don't know why that was what my association with it was, but I truly felt like I needed to like put this division in my personality. And then I started getting this weird, like at some point I really wanted to do YouTube, and I do still want to. Like I would love to post more long form content. I just don't really do anything that's exciting to post, so we haven't gotten there yet, but this summer maybe. But then even with that, I felt like I had to pick one specific vibe, and that's what my long form content was going to be. I couldn't post like a week of workouts and then a hiking video back to back, because they just wouldn't mesh, and that's just not true. Like now I've gotten so many people pop up on my For You page and on Instagram and stuff that have both of those as hobby, kind of your granola bitch and then also your gym rat. And it's so cool seeing that. And that was one of the big things that made me realize, like, I love the podcast. I have so much love for the podcast. I love podcasting. Like, I love talking, obviously. I talk all the fucking time. And I realized that because, like, it had become a thing that I was, like, kind of stressed about because I didn't have any more topics to talk about. I feel like there was only so many things I could talk about when it comes to the gym, because I don't have, like, a ton of education in, like, nutrition and stuff like that. Like, I'm not, like, a nutritionist who's going to talk to you about every single macronutrient that ever exists. And there's a million podcast episodes. I'm just like a normal bitch who's just trying to talk about some things that I feel like are important. But I was so isolated to what I felt I could talk about. And I didn't want that anymore. Like, I didn't want the podcast to feel like something that only one group of people could enjoy, or only, like, I have people who follow me on my gym Instagram, which I'm still going to keep those separate because I do like having the separation for my gym content, because I don't know, I like it. I'm gonna keep that. But the podcast felt like something of like, oh, only the people who follow my fitness page would care to listen to the podcast, because that's what it talks about. Like, it talks about gym and fitness and wellness and nutrition, whereas the people who follow my main Instagram maybe wouldn't appreciate the content or wouldn't enjoy it. So then it felt like I was weirdly isolating people out of my life from enjoying, like, I don't know if that makes sense. I'm also, like, I don't do the podcast for other people. Sorry to tell you, I don't do this for you. But it is something that I just truly enjoy. And as a person who wouldn't classify themselves as very creative, it's kind of like my creative output. But I just don't want to isolate what I can talk about and also feel like I'm stuck in this weird box. So I just wanted, like, we're not going to change the name anymore. I'm putting my foot down and I'm saying this is the name of the podcast. I'm going to get new photos done this summer, hopefully, when it's nice out. And we'll set up a little corner in my room when we move, and that'll be the podcast chair. But I just wanted more diversity in what I feel like I could talk about and also feel like fits into the niche of the podcast. The podcast can be its own niche. And if that's what my niche is, that's fine, because that niche is going to be like an umbrella niche of all these other niches. Say niche 10 times fast. Niche. But you know what I mean? There's still going to be a certain vibe on the podcast, but I just want more. I just want to, like, I want to feel more freedom in what I post, even though it's literally me who, like, put myself in this weird box. But now I'm taking myself out of the box. I put myself in a box, and now we're taking myself out of the box. I don't want to be in the box anymore. So we're going to talk about gym. We're going to talk about fitness and food, and I don't know. I would love to do some true crime episodes. If you guys want that, let me know, because if you don't, then I'm not going to talk about it. Well, maybe I still will, because this podcast isn't for you. It's for me. But, I just want a broader... I don't know. I don't really care. I don't owe you an explanation. I changed the name. Enjoy it. Like it. Like, subscribe, follow. But anyways. I guess the whole point of this, I guess we did a little intro. So now you know something about me. If you've been listening for 1.5 years and you didn't know anything about me, now you know a little bit of something. Or if you're new, hi. My name's Emily. My friends call me Em. I'm trying to get them to call me Miles. We're working on it. But I think the biggest takeaway is you're allowed to pick niches in your life. You're allowed to pick things that you, like, I almost want to say, like, specialize, but that, I don't know, that feels like a weird term. But you're allowed to pick certain vibes in your life that fit closely with what you want to do and what you want to be. But you're not stuck with that. You can change. You can change every day. And if anybody talks shit about it, go fuck them. Don't fuck them. I mean, fuck them, but don't fuck them. I need to stop talking. We're gonna go. Anyways, this is your fault. You decided to click on a podcast from a girl who literally knows nothing but always has something to fucking say. So, anyways, have a good week, you guys. These are still going out on Thursday, so have a good weekend, I guess. I don't know. Like, comment, subscribe, whatever. We're on YouTube. Go watch it on YouTube. Link will be in the show notes. I haven't figured out what the outro is going to be for the new name and stuff. So, happy Thursday. I hope you have a good spring. And I hope you remember that your life is yours to live. And nobody can say shit. So, yeah. Thanks, guys. Bye.